Kia ora guys, Michelle here. It's an absolutely miserable day outside today, which is why we are inside, covering off a topic that I didn't really do too much research on before I started my thru hike of Te Araroa, and that is, what exactly do you do before you start hiking? What is the best way of getting ready to hike for the day on a long distance trail like Te Araroa? So in this video we are covering off my morning routine on Te Araroa. Before we move on any further, if you haven't already, go and check me out on Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description down below. For just a small contribution every month, you can get access to a whole bunch of exclusive content from me, including some upcoming live Q&A sessions, just like the one I had last week, which will be held every single month exclusively for my patrons. So the first thing that would happen on trail in the morning is that I would get woken up by the blaring sound of my alarm. Now, I say blaring, but I did not have that set to full volume. Obviously, I wanted to respect other hikers' privacy. But usually my alarm would be going off around about 6 a.m. in the morning. When I first started, I was setting it a little bit later, but I realized that it took me nearly an hour to pack up camp every day in the morning when I first began, until I got used to my morning routine. And I didn't want to keep being the last person to leave camp in the morning. I'm not the biggest morning person anyway. It takes me a little while to get going in the morning, so I'd usually lay in my sleeping bag for about 10 minutes after my alarm had gone off, just while I was waking up. I might check some messages or things on my phone, maybe update my journal if I hadn't done it the night before, and then it was pretty much a quick dash out of my tent to the toilet, because chances are I'd been holding on to it basically all night. Once I got back from the toilet, the next step in the morning was the worst part of the day, which is deflating my pad and my pillow. Definitely a sad feeling to open up the valve and hear that hiss in the morning. Now, I try to be as efficient as I can in the morning on the trail, and like I said, that's mainly because I just seem to be very slow packing up, and everybody else seemed to be able to get out of camp so much quicker than me. So where possible, I was trying to do multiple things at once, and one of the biggest areas where I did this was with my breakfast. So after I'd started to deflate my pad so that most of the air could be coming out naturally whilst I'm doing other things, I generally get some water on to boil for my breakfast that morning. And it would also be for that all-important morale booster, which was my morning cup of tea. So while I'm waiting for my water to boil, this is the time when I'm generally taking care of all those other toiletry and hygiene items. So I'd generally be washing my face and brushing my teeth. So this is one of the things that I did that a lot of people thought I was crazy for, but I carried a little bit of soap with me, and every morning I would give myself a wash. Just wash my face to refresh myself a little bit for the day ahead. Again, this is all to do with my anxiety and how I try to normalize things in my everyday life to minimize the chances of my anxiety impacting me. So I try and keep to routines as much as possible, and that includes when I'm out on a thru hike. So in the mornings I'd be washing my face from maybe a stream or a tap if I'm in town or at a hut. But one thing to be wary of is if you are going to attend to your hygiene with water from a water supply, maybe from a rainwater tank, or if you're at a hut in an area which is prone to drought, maybe you just want to be using your drinking water to do that, and just trying to ration it as much as possible, because obviously the more water you use to clean yourself, the less water there is there for other people who might need to drink that water in the future. And then the last thing that I would do is to just give my hair a nice comb out, and I would generally plait my hair either into 2 braids or just 1 braid. That would keep it out of my face and stop it from getting knotty, but also when my hair is in plaits it doesn't get quite so dirty, so it can go a lot longer without needing to be washed. By this point the water in my pot has probably boiled, and so I can start to pour it into my teacup and have my cup of tea, and also pour it into my breakfast bowls. That would either be my nice breakfast scramble or some sort of porridge. If it was porridge, it will probably need a little bit more boiling actually on the stove. And then again, just trying to be as efficient as possible, I'd be eating my breakfast whilst I'm doing other things in my tent. So when I get to camp at the end of the day, I generally put everything in my tent in specific places so that I know where they are, so I know I'm going to have them with me the next day and I'm not going to leave anything behind. So I'd start to gather all of these things together and start packing them into their individual stuff sacks and things. So all of my electronics obviously went into one. I've now washed and brushed my teeth, so I can put all of my toiletries into one stuff sack. Some people out there might be thinking, why are you brushing your teeth before you've had your breakfast? That's just what I've always done in my everyday life anyway, so I don't see any need to change that whilst I'm out on the trail. And then I will be starting to think about getting changed out of my sleeping clothes and into my hiking clothes. So I try to leave this a little bit later in the process in the morning, because I like to stay in those warm clothes that I've slept in for as long as possible, especially if it's a cold morning on the trail. I'll pack all my clothes up into their nice little bag, and so what I'm left with is some nice little bags and stuff sacks and things sitting in my tent, all ready to be put into my pack when I finish my breakfast. Once breakfast is finished, then the most important thing to do is clean out my pot. I want to make sure I'm not giving myself any stomach bugs from not keeping my pot clean, and I'm also rinsing out my cup for my cup of tea at this point as well, packing all of that down into the pot and putting that in the pot cozy, which is how it sits in my pack. The next thing I probably look at doing is filtering some water, or at least getting my 2 bottles of water ready for hiking for the day. So if I had a nice filtered water supply, I'd just go and fill them up, but if I needed to go to the water source and actually filter the water, then I would start doing this now so that they were ready to pack into my pack a little bit later. As I got further through my hike, I'd also start taking snacks out of my food bag and setting them to one side so that I could have easy access to them through the day. Once all those things are done, then we're at the business end of the day. We're almost ready to leave and it's time to start packing everything into my pack. So if it's a nice day, I'm going to bring everything outside of my tent, lay it out around my pack and get ready to start packing it in. If it's rainy, I would just pack my pack actually inside my tent, and my tent would be the last thing to come down. If you want to see how over 80 days I figured out exactly how to pack my pack, I'll link that video for you up here and also in the description down below. And then the last thing that I'm going to be doing is packing away my tent. The reason that I leave this until last is because generally every single day on Te Araroa I woke up with condensation on my tent. Now this is due to a number of factors. A lot of people will say that it's because I had a single walled tent, but I don't think it is so much. A lot of the hikers that I was hiking around had double walled tents and they had the same problems with condensation. That's just the kind of environment that we have here in New Zealand. In fact, the only place I really didn't notice condensation on my tent was while I was hiking down 90 Mile Beach, and I think that was just because of the ocean breeze that was coming off of the sea, which managed to keep it at bay. So I give it a shake out as much as possible. Sometimes I'd let another hiker help me with this, and then I'd just get it all packed down and put into its stuff sack. And if it was condensation-y, then it meant that I couldn't put it inside my pack, which was my preferred packing plan. So I would just attach it to the straps and the loops at the bottom of my pack on the outside instead. And then it was usually time to grab my trekking poles, put my pack on and go running off down the trail after my other hiking companions who'd already set out before me. Now, I'm sure you've probably thought to yourself already, well, this is all very well and good if you are staying in your tent whilst you're out on the trail. But of course, the nature of Te Araroa is that not every single night will be spent in your tent. In fact, a lot of nights whilst you're out on the trail, especially if you are doing the full through hike, will be spent in other types of accommodation, for example, backcountry huts, even motels, backpackers, and staying with trail angels. Now, of course, with all of these options, you're actually going to have a roof or some sort of a shelter over your head and a bed or something to sleep on. So that means that you don't have to pitch your tent, and you also don't have to do things like blow up your inflatable mattress and your pillow if you carry one with you. Now you might think, well, those are only 2 or 3 things that I don't have to worry about in the morning. But in actual fact, your entire morning routine can change quite substantially just by not having to do those 1 or 2 things. For example, with me, I often knew that I could lie in bed for a little bit longer in the morning because I knew I didn't have to spend extra time packing up my tent and deflating my sleeping mattress. On top of that, when I tended to stay in somewhere like a backpackers or a hostel or somewhere where there were a lot of hikers in one room together, I tended to try and keep all of my gear still inside of its pack. I wasn't one of these hikers who would just spread my gear out everywhere. And because I was keeping all of my gear inside my pack, it meant that in the morning when I went to leave, often there was less packing that I needed to do. And for me, this had the very happy consequence of, instead of being the last one to leave in the morning, as I usually was when I had to pack up camp, I could usually be one of the first ones out on trail and get a little bit of a head start on everyone else. Okay guys, that is it from this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Why don't you go and leave me a comment down below and tell me exactly what your morning routine looks like on an overnight or a multi-day hiking trip, or maybe even on your most recent thru hike. Once you've done that, don't forget to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell. Next week, make sure you stay tuned for my 1700 kilometer or 1000 mile gear review of my ZPAX duplex tent, which I know you guys are all waiting for. Until then, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.